cryptocurrency. And when you talk about systematic change, it brings about transparency. What cryptocurrency do, Mr. Speaker, because it is based on blockchain, it brings about transparency. Maybe to bring to speed my good friend, chairman for CEPIC, chairman, Senator Osotsi, a blockchain is where you do a transaction and immediately you get your receipt. That receipt is distributed to everybody in the network, meaning you can never go back there to complain your receipt is different from everybody in the world. And to bring you very close to this scenario, Mr. Speaker, during the presidential election, we did what we call blockchain without even knowing, Mr. Speaker. Because at the counting of the presidential results, that form 30, was it 36 or 35? 34. That form 34 was stuck on the door, and it was photocopied by everybody. It was even distributed online. And that's why it was very hard for anybody to try to change it. Because trying to change it, you'll have to recall all the forms in the whole country and change each and every one, and then you give us a copy. So, Mr. Speaker, blockchain brings about transparency. And if the chairman, who commented about cryptocurrency, will take that seriously, together with the governor of Central Bank, I believe we are going to move to the right direction, and this is what we call the new financial infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, because I had made my comments yesterday, I don't know what stops the National Treasury, and of course even Central Bank, to even have what we call digital screens, even at the Senate here. You know, Mr. Speaker, when you go to a bank, you are able to see how much a dollar is exchanging with Kenya shillings, Australian dollar, Chinese yuan, and all that. What would stop both the central bank, the control of budgets, and the Treasury to have something like that even here at the Senate? So today we'll be able to know which county received what, how much, and how much they received a few days ago, Mr. Speaker. What I'm trying to bring across, Mr. Speaker, it is we need a transparency infrastructure when it comes to the way we transact business, and especially on our legal tender, which is the Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker. And as I conclude, I don't know, but we should allow, or at least come up with a law that regularizes or legalizes cryptocurrency. Because, Mr. Speaker, just because you do not regulate it, it doesn't mean it is illegal. There were youths here in Nairobi, millions of them, who queued to have their eyeballs scanned. Mr. Speaker, some were arrested, some were even deported to their country, Mr. Speaker. But because we do not have regulations, Mr. Speaker, that's why such a thing would happen. But if there were regulations, the World Coin could have come to the office, either the CMA or the Office of ICT, and come and report this is what we want to do. Then Kenyans could have been protected, Mr. Speaker. So we would want to urge the central bank to not just sit there, just to adapt to the changes that are happening in our financial institution, financial system, and financial infrastructure and architecture, so that they go in line with the current world today. Mr. Speaker, I do support.
Senator Olekina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the committee report on the approval of the nominee as a central government. Mr. Speaker, during this time, we are dealing with a lot of challenges as an economy. We have issues that must be thought out clearly. The only way we are going to save this country is by ensuring that we pass or advance economic policies that will be able to really think about the future generation. Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest challenges we have in this country is that a lot of people who are tasked with responsibilities are not qualified enough. And in most cases, they are appointed based on who they know or where they've been. But when it comes to the issue of monetary policy, when it comes to the issue of an economy of a country, such as this, where, Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, actually 2 years, we have seen the way the exchange currency in this country has gone so down. Today, a dollar is trading at about 150 shillings. And I dare say, all that leads down to the policies. When you look at our neighboring countries, Mr. Speaker, a good example is Ethiopia. Another good example is a country like Rwanda. There are policies which are defined to protect the currencies of those countries. And when you have someone lead the central bank, you should have somebody who understands the consequences and unintended consequences of protecting trade in the country. Mr. Speaker, if you go to Ethiopia today and you attempt to exchange dollars, when you do it in a hotel, the exchange rate would be, for $1, you'll probably get 55. If you go to the streets, you will get 110. In fact, in most cases, when you go to those hotels and you try and pay with their own money, they will not allow you to do that. In fact, what they'll tell you, no, you pay with dollars because they want to build that economy. Mr. Speaker, if you trade in a country like Rwanda today and Burundi, it will be very difficult for you to be able to take all your profits out and take them to your country. I am not saying that we should start policies that protects or hinder investors from repatriating their profits. But I think we have to have a balance. This issue where the dollar is constantly on a free fall, it's something which should worry any economist in this country. Any leader in this country should be worried. So I hope as we're discussing, and I know I had a quick chat with Senator Tabitha on the gentleman that we're talking about, where we're talking about to approve his nomination. And she said to me, he's very knowledgeable. I do hope that we're not just coming here to approve for someone else to go and sit in central bank, but then move this country to where no one would want to be. Currently, Mr. Speaker, we have to be very realistic. De La Rue moved out of this country. When you talk about central bank in this country, they are tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that they come up with policies to print currencies. We need to know, why is it that De La Rue left? How are we going to be able to print money? And I'm not saying for the sake of trying to stabilize the currency, but sometimes you have notes that become too old, so you want to print new. So I think as we deliberate and we reward Kenyans and talk about people taking over, I think for me what I would actually say is that for this gentleman who have seen the recommendations are quite good, I hope that you can be able to restructure the roadmap to saving this economy. You can be able to, in fact, if you just do one thing, if you stabilize our currency so that we move from being slaves of hard currencies, at least we can talk about Kenya having a future. The biggest challenge we have today is that although Kenya is regarded as the biggest economy in East Africa, or even some might even say in East and Central Africa, because of its stability, the problem we have is that our currency is still a soft currency. You know, I hear people talk about why is it that we have to trade with the dollar? Why can't we not trade among each other with our currencies? You know, and maybe that's something we need to talk about. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I had one of my colleagues talk about the G2G agreement in terms of importing of petroleum into this country. And that G2G, a lot of people don't really understand. The government had nothing to do with the money. The government doesn't own anything. It is the oil marketers that own. But if the dollar continue being on a free fall, the oil marketers will still end up paying a lot of money, and that pain will still go to the citizens. So I think we have to be clear. Maybe we should have had those arrangements basing it on the Kenya shillings. I would be happy if this gentleman would come up with policies that now would propel our Kenya shillings to be a currency that we can be able to negotiate in the East African community. I was in Arusha the other day, and I was very happy, Mr. Speaker, because I needed to deposit some Kenya shillings in my bank in Kenya. And I was very happy that I walked into Kenya Commercial Bank in Arusha, and I could deposit Kenya shillings, and they reflect immediately. So that shows, and if you go to Rwanda, the same. If you go to Uganda, the same, where Kenya Commercial Bank is. In fact, if you trade, Mr. Speaker, I happen to be a trader among the East African countries, the financial institution in those countries will tell you that it is easier for me to pay you in Kenya shillings than to pay you in dollars. So I think it's about time that we now change our thinking, you know, and not continue being slaves of hard currencies. Today, look at the Kenya shillings. For $1, it's 150 shillings. Very soon, it will be 200 shillings. Suppose we can borrow the policies that are being applied by countries like Ethiopia, countries like Burundi, and then localize it. We don't necessarily have to go the way they go, but we can also localize it so that we can protect our currency. I do hope that the new governor of Central Bank, I hope that this House will approve him, will be able to now think outside the box. We can no longer continue to try and build this economy with a cut and paste. We can no longer continue to build this economy with a textbook description of how you build an economy. We have to now start thinking outside the box and say, what works for us? Mr. Speaker, if you go to a country like Tanzania today, and the Dairy Board of Tanzania has got quotas. They say if you want to export milk to Tanzania, you can only be given a license for up to 6 months, and each consignment, you have to pay some money. And they put a maximum of liters that you can be able to do what? Export to Tanzania. And that is all advised by the central bank in terms of protecting their farmers, so that whatever the farmers have becomes valuable and meaningful. So, Mr. Speaker, we are really trending in very dangerous ground at the moment in terms of trying to save this economy. You know, politics aside, we talk about issues of the bottom up. We talk about issues of different types of economics. But the truth of the matter is our people are suffering. Our currency is one of the things that think throughout and how we're going to protect our people. Because everything we're buying now, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the issue of fuel, relies on the dollar. So when we buy fuel at a price of about 200, and 54% of that is in taxes, the 46%, you would think Kenyans will still be able to afford. No, they can't. becomes very expensive. But if the shilling was stable, people will be able to, to deal with it. We have such an industrious economy, a resilient population. So with good policies, good monetary policies, we will be able to move this country into, thinking, being futuristic. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that from time to time, and maybe we may end up having to amend the Constitution, because the Constitution says that, I think Article 231, that the central bank governor cannot be directed by anybody. I hope that we can be able to amend either the PFM Act, and also maybe the Constitution, just like Article 153 of the Constitution mandates each and every cabinet secretary to table the report on how their departments are performing. Maybe it is time to consider amending the Constitution, amending the PFM Act, to be able to set timelines and goals and milestones, whereby the central bank governor can be able to come to Parliament and give a report on the efforts that is put in place in terms of developing policy that will end up stabilizing our currencies. That, Mr. Speaker, I believe will be able to promote even confidence among traders in this country. Mr. Speaker, I support and I look forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni, the Honourable Senator is just concluded his remarks.
Speaker, because the Senator was making a very good, informed contribution, I waited towards his tail end so as to rise on Standing Order number 105. And is the member, Mr. Speaker, in order to blame the falling Kenya shilling on the government when he knows, or he ought to know, that there exists the Foreign Exchange Transaction Act of 1999 that liberalized exchange rates? Why would he want to play, Mr. Speaker, politics with such an emotive and important issue to belittle it, to look like a contest between us who are in government and them who will come in government someday? Is he in order, Mr. Speaker?
Senator Boni, I'm afraid I may have to overrule your point of order, because it is being raised when the Honourable Senator has already concluded making his remarks. So it does not hold. Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also like to support the motion, the report. Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed, the central bank is a very important institution in any country. We know of late, Mr. Speaker, that we've been facing severe monetary issues and fiscal issues. We know that the country, where it is, needs to put itself on a recovery path, faced with the downward trend of economic crisis across the globe, faced with the dollar mopping by the United States, faced by declining or changing climatic conditions that have affected our production of the major export earners, and having come shortly after the COVID and 4 seasons of drought, Mr. Speaker, sir, we need a strong institution in the name of central bank. We need sound policies that can be able to put the country back on the track of economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is indeed known to everybody that save of tea, everything else that we consume in this country is imported. I've listened to my fellow senators give their presentation. Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed, we must ensure that Kenya becomes self-sufficient in terms of food production. Kenya becomes self-sufficient in terms of edible oil production. We have climatic conditions that can favor us, but because of unfavorable geopolitics, we have not been able to attract enough investors to come and start up farming edible oil in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that we spend millions of dollars to import edible oil. We know that we spend millions of dollars to import even clothing. We have climatic conditions that can be able to support BT cotton, and we can indeed revamp our textile industry. Mr. Speaker, sir, I was in a foreign country just the other day, and I was surprised by the resilience of the citizens. I was surprised by the fact that farmers, especially in the coffee sector, most of them are young farmers, young researchers, who have delivered, because of a deliberate effort by the government of Colombia, have done everything possible to win even young people to join the coffee farming, because the option that they were doing before is known to everybody. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is indeed important that we have the right leadership in this very important institution. As we in the Kenya Kwanza government strive to put back this country in the path of economic recovery, we can have the backing sounding policies, and most important, Mr. Speaker, sir, establishment of an industrial development bank as it was in the ICDC, establishment of the enterprise development bank that can be able to support especially the younger generation without having to ask for collateral from them. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, the institution of the central bank is a key player. It is a central player in determining the monetary and the fiscal policy of this country. We need sound leadership. Mr. Speaker, sir, I therefore feel like with the right chairmanship, with the right governor, with the right treasury CS, we can get this country back in the path of recovery. But this cannot happen, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we Kenyans do not change the narrative of every time blaming it on the government. We must also, as Kenyans, look at our habits. Mr. Speaker, sir, many a times, including in this House, we conduct business with lights on. We complain that the power of electricity is very high. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the current technology, we can fix a few solar panels up there. We can light our house using solar panel. We do not need to pay electricity bill. We must change the narrative of how we as Kenyans, our consumer mannerism. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must change that. Because there is no way, Mr. Speaker, sir, we'll keep on doing the things the same way and expect to have different results. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is indeed the duty of every senator in this House, and I would want to challenge ourselves as we go to our counties, as we conduct the oversight law that we are mandated to do, as we do the representation law that we are supposed to do, that we start advising our people that we must change the narrative of the way we do our things. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've seen, having lived in foreign countries for some years, people do what you call sharing of cars. Here in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are complaining our roads are not good enough, fuel is expensive, but Mr. Speaker, sir, you look at the cars that we are buying, even as parliamentarians, and I think going forward, and I would urge the members that we become a bit selfless, that we remit as it was intended to under 3,000 cc. We drive smaller cars so that we can also be able to save our environment, one, and secondly, save on the fuel gas cylinders that are being driven around. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must tell ourselves the truth, and the truth is that we have found ourselves in a hard economic situation. To be able to recover, we must change the way we do our things and the way we do the things in this country. With a population that is getting ever younger, getting more educated, but with no opportunities, Mr. Speaker, the institution of the central bank can create incentives around industrialization, like it was in the early 60s, when you could walk into the ICDC with a business proposal and get finance to start business. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have a young generation that has a platform in the IT industry, but it needs them to have the capacity to invest in the same. Without wanting to equate that with the cryptocurrency, there are thousands of business that can be done, but we must create enough hubs across the country so that we'd have enough infrastructure to support upcoming business. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I wind up, I would want to urge us all that it is indeed important that we realize that if we have to change the economic fortunes of this country, we have to change the narrative of the way we've been doing things. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Senator Osoti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also raise my voice on this motion. Mr. Speaker, I am one of the people who are quite very careful in supporting appointments that are made by the Kenya Kwanza government. But this particular one, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I fully support Andrew Mukite Musangi to be the chairperson of the central bank, because this particular individual, I know him personally. He is the son of the pioneer Vice Chancellor of Egerton University, Professor Richard Musangi, and I have known him as a very, very serious lawyer on commercial matters, insurance matters. So he's an able person, very experienced and knowledgeable for this position. He may not be belonging to the same political persuasion that some of us have, but I know him as a capable person who is needed at this critical time when this country is facing economic challenges. Mr. Speaker, the role of central bank is to provide the right fiscal and monetary policies for the economy to thrive. And I think Mr. Musangi will provide the leadership that is required for the central bank to achieve an environment that has a sound environment for fiscal and monetary policy. I also expect my good friend Musangi to also take charge of economic management of this country. Because lately, Mr. Speaker, we are now seeing a situation where serious matters of management of economy are now being discussed by those who are supposed to be driving this economy on social media. We have seen comments being made carelessly by people like David Indi on social media, and an economy cannot grow where some of these issues are being discussed carelessly like that. So we look forward to Musangi bringing sanity in central bank and bringing sanity to those who advise the president on how the economy should run, so that we have the right environment that the economy can thrive. And one of the things that Mr. Musangi can deal with is the issue of the exchange rate. He has now a chance to ensure that we deal with the problem of the exchange rate. Exchange rate is a key economic indicator. When the exchange rate is very high, clearly, Mr. Speaker, that affects the performance of the economy. So you cannot say that when the exchange rate is fluctuating upwards, that it has nothing to do with the economy. It has every reason to do with the economy. We are also looking forward to Musangi and the team of advisors to make sure that the decisions which are made, economic decisions, they have fiscal and monetary thinking around them. The G2G deal, I don't think it was well thought out. If it was well thought out and motivated by economic situation we are having, we would not be having this problem. So we look forward as Kenyans in economic improvement, guided by a strong team at the CBK, led by my good friend Musangi. So I want to support this motion and say that I, as a Kenyan, I fully support Andrew Musangi to be the chairperson of Central Bank of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I pray for my friend to perform better, to excel in his role as the chairperson of the CBK. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Nyamu.
Thank you, Senator Cherargei. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to support the nomination of Mr. Andrew Musangi as the chair of the board of the Central Bank of Kenya. As a colleague and a senior in the legal profession, Mr. Musangi has demonstrated in his resume the wide contribution he has had to nation building. And as we are all aware, the president inherited a dilapidated economy.
But when he spoke about two things which I found critical when he was addressing UNGA yesterday in New York, he said about climate change and also about fairness in terms of international financial institutions, Mr. Speaker. Why should a country like Kenya, which is developing, pay more than a country which is in the first world like Canada and other countries, Mr. Speaker? So I want to thank the president because the fact that he's pushing African nations to rally behind him and start for what we call fairness in financial systems from the World Bank, from Bretton institutions, it will assist that we get fairness and justice, Mr. Speaker. And these are the things that we would like to see, Mr. Speaker. The position of government has not been to dismiss anybody through Twitter or to call to look down upon Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, because this government was formed to fix the mess, an economic mess that was there, Mr. Speaker. So on the issue of, and we want to ask the country, Mr. Speaker, to be patient because when the dollar will stabilize, of course the cost of fuel will come down, especially from January, Mr. Speaker, and as we approach winter in parts of America and other places, Mr. Speaker. And also you are aware there is war in Ukraine and Russia, which has greatly affected. And Mr. Speaker, and I want to tell the country, because we are truthful men, that the issue of fuel, Kenya does not produce fuel. That's a fact. Number two, I want to challenge the Committee of Energy. I saw Senator Matinga talking, to go and find out what happened to the tool oil in Turkana. What is it? What are we supposed to do? Number two, Mr. Speaker, the oil-producing countries under OPEC decided to sit down and cut the supply of fuel into the market. And yet the demand is still very high. You remember even during COVID, Mr. Speaker, they had supply OPEC, and that is the challenge that we can still talk about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the fourth point is on the giving the fact about the public debt. We are aware, Mr. Speaker, and I hope under Article 125, which Musangi should be aware, Mukite, that when the parliament shall require him, and it does not mean National Assembly, it means National Assembly and the Senate, Mr. Speaker. We will expect him to lead, even in appearing before our Senate Committee on Finance chaired by Captain Ali Roba, Senator, and his members, Mr. Speaker, and when called upon and require. Mr. Speaker, I saw the other day, and we are not interested in fighting with the National Assembly. And those fights are fruitless. That the National Assembly indicated that they want only to be the ones approving and being briefed, Mr. Speaker. And that is why they rejected our amendments. I hope we will send strong men and women of the Senate to the mediation committee and try and talk sense to members of National Assembly that public debt is a concern of all Kenyans. Unless they are telling us, Mr. Speaker, there are Kenyans who are in counties and there are Kenyans who are in Kenya. Because what I know is 47 county governments, one nation, one people under God, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another issue I wanted to raise is on the withdrawals. And I heard my brother, Senator Kisang from Elgeyo Marakwet, talk about 1 million, Mr. Speaker. Nowadays, to withdraw 1 million, you must tell us how many milk of cows you have sold, Mr. Speaker, from where, how many cows, what we have sold. Mr. Speaker, while we appreciate this limit is important for money laundering and fighting issues of money laundering, we must be realistic. Why don't we raise even 20 million Kenyan shillings? It's even, because if you have to withdraw 5 million, Mr. Speaker, you will need a lot of clearance, Mr. Speaker. So we are requesting, and I hope Chairperson Andrew Mukite Musangi, the chair, who we have given him blessings, allow us to withdraw up to 20 million, Mr. Speaker, because 1 million is not enough. It's not even enough to buy, it's not even enough, Mr. Speaker, to buy one or two slave queens in this town, even a demi, Mr. Speaker. You know the cost of the cost of everything has gone up, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, finally is to agree with the report, to wish him very well, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy for the first time we are now rewarding integrity. To wind up corruption, let us reward integrity, and that is, Mr. Speaker, because of the task ahead of us, allow me to rest my submissions there and congratulate the committee and fully support, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. As you are aware, we have a Kamkunji to handle, and therefore, at this juncture, I will call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I take this opportunity to reply to this motion. Very much greatly, thanking all the colleagues who've been able to contribute to this particular great motion in regards to the opportunity for the chair of CBK, led by none other than Senator Boni, who seconded this motion. I really want to appreciate, and still appreciate all the other senators, starting with Senator Tangwa, Ledama, Senator Miraj, Senator Karen, Senator Wafula, Gataya, Chimera, Senator Kisang, Senator Ososi, and none other than Senator Cheralgai. I really want to appreciate all the contributions we've been able to hear, the concerns that you've been able to raise. And I want to add my voice as we conclude and say that Mr. Musangi comes from very humble backgrounds. An indication that anyone can hold any office in this country, doesn't matter where you start and come from. He's been able to also have a good background in terms of his experience of 28 years matters, governance, leadership within the different corporate sectors that he's been able to have very high value. As yesterday I indicated, this is a man who's been able to build up his wealth. His worth of $1 billion. And this is very great at a personal level, how he's been able to grow his empire for a long duration. Discussions have ranged from different economic industrials, the currency, the dollar rate. All these colleagues have been able to raise. And I believe working with the other colleagues in Central Bank, that is the governor and also the deputy governor, Madam Susan, we believe that they are going to make changes and improve the economy of this country. They are also going to advise correctly matters finance, matters economy in this particular nation. At the same time, I want to finish, Mr. Speaker, by stating and acknowledging that His Excellency the President has appointed a man who is very competent, who is eloquent, who understands his roles very much. And this is an indication that anybody from any region, from any tribe, can be able to hold a position in this country. And a clear indication that there is diverse opportunities in this country. I want to say that in regards to matters fraudulent bank withdrawals, something that I've been very keen on with our vetting process, I believe that the leadership of the CBK, led by the governor, and also with the new chair coming on board, they are going to ensure that Kenyans' money are safe. The issues that we've seen in terms of fraudulent withdrawals are going to be dealt with. Strict measures are going to be put. At the moment, we have actually 42 banks in this country. And we believe that these banks are actually more than enough and should be able to ensure that they offer Kenyans what they did in terms of economic support, different financial muscles from different business entrepreneurs. So in those many few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I do beg to reply.
Now, honorable senators, this matter does not concern counties, and therefore voting shall be by voice, and I proceed to put the question. That the Senate, adopt the joint report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning of the National Assembly and the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate on the vetting of Mr. Andrew Mukite Musangi for appointment as the chairperson of the Board of Directors of the Central Bank of Kenya, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 19 September 2023, and that pursuant to Section 11(2)(a) of the Central Bank of Kenya Act and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, the Senate approved the appointment of Mr. Andrew Mukite Musangi to the position of chairperson of the Board of the Central Bank of Kenya. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Yes, what is your point of order, Senator Boni?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise under Standing Order number 35 to move that the Senate do now adjourn, Mr. Speaker, for the reason that the Senate anticipates to go and hold sittings outside Nairobi, specifically in Turkana County. And for this reason, Mr. Speaker, I request that we adjourn to allow us to do the necessary housekeeping and, Mr. Speaker, preparations to enable us travel to Turkana. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request Senator Chimera. I request Senator Chimera to second me.
Is okay now? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second.
Honorable Senators, I now proceed to propose the question that the Senate do now adjourn to address the plenary and committee sittings to be held in the coming week in Turkana County. I do not see any member interested in debating that motion, and therefore I will straight away proceed to put the question. That is, the Senate do now adjourn to address plenary and committee sittings to be held in the coming week in Turkana County. Will as many as of this opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. We need to. Now, honorable senators, be upstanding. The Senate, therefore, stands adjourned until Tuesday, 26 September 2023 at 2:30 p.m. at the Turkana County Assembly Chamber in Lodwar, Turkana County. Thank you.
If you're just joining us, the Speaker of the Senate has adjourned the sitting, and as you have heard, the Senate will convene next week on Tuesday, but in Turkana County as part of the Senate machinani. But this afternoon, the senators have approved the nomination for appointment as the chairperson of the Board of Directors of the Central Bank of Kenya. This is Mr. Andrew Mukite Musangi. My name is Edward Kabasa. I hope you enjoyed your viewing. I now hand you back to the normal broadcasting at the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. But you can always revisit this live broadcast on YouTube, courtesy of the Parliament of Kenya YouTube channel. Good evening.